In this video, we're going to go over 5 different power punches found in Kung Fu fighting. Here we go. The first technique is called a throwing punch. With a throwing punch, I'm going to extend my arm upward and outward. When I strike, my elbow will be out and I'm going to have my fingers down. I can hit with either the first 2 knuckles or the last 3 knuckles like a very long straight punch, or I can rise it up and hit underneath their chin or hit underneath their arm. I can also hit with my forearm if I take this strike and swing it around. So this is a lot like a straight punch, but it have a lot more range, and also the arc of it comes slightly upward. So it's really nice to slip underneath somebody's guard.
Okay, let's start out in a side-facing cat, step forward into a forward bow and arrow stance. Again, side-facing cat, bringing that arm around, swinging that front arm down, and then that backhand rips straight upward. In this exercise, I'm winding that front hand up so I can do a back fist before my strike, and I can use that back fist to smash someone's guard before I hit them with the other hand. That backhand can swing upward, outward, or inward, and that'll become a little more obvious when I do the actual two-person work. Remember, these drills are for power generation and body connection, so when you're actually sparring or fighting, you don't wind up your hands for such big motion. You just shoot them straight out from your guard.
The next technique is called an overhand punch. An overhand punch looks a lot like I'm pitching a baseball. With an overhand punch, I'm going to start by rising my elbow up somewhere around my ear or eye level. I'm going to extend my fist outward, and then I'm going to swing my arm downward after I strike. When I hit, I'm usually hitting with either the first 2 or the last 3 knuckles. After I hit, I'm going to rip my hand down past the target to generate more force. I can also just swing my arm down and just smash him with my forearm as well as a different option. The overhand punch is perfect to go over somebody's guard. So if they have a nice tight guard or a very powerful long bridge guard, this can go right over the top and score. This is a very, very powerful technique and one of my personal favorites.
I'm starting in a sideward facing cat and then stepping forward into a bow and arrow stance. As I step, I'm whipping that front hand down and then ripping that backhand overhand. As you can see, when I step, I'm stepping on my heel, rotating on the ball of the feet, and then I'm also sliding that back leg out, and I'm leaning my body to the side, so I can get the best arc to swing my hand overhead. The exercise is designed to develop momentum and the ability to swing my arm. There's a lot of force generated in this particular technique, and you see it very commonly in a lot of combat sports, and it scores a lot of different knockouts. An important point to remember is that I do not need that back fist before I do the overhand strike. I can just take that overhand strike directly from my guard and whip it into the opponent.
The third technique is an uppercut. With an uppercut, my elbow is down, my thumb is out, and my knuckles are facing upward, so my elbow is bent. And I'm hitting usually with the last 3 knuckles. With an uppercut, I need to sink my body to load the punch up, rotate to the side, and then rise upward with a strike. When I rise upward, I want to hit the target and go through the target. Very important to note, with an uppercut, I'm not hitting to the front of my body. I'm hitting to the side of my body. When I hit to the side of my body, I get to activate my back muscles and then power through. The opposite hand also generates force by pulling behind me when I'm doing the strike. I can strike in the body or I can strike in the head. It's a very, very powerful technique, but it's closer range, so you have to make sure that you do something to close the distance before you throw this uppercut.
For the uppercut, I'm going to start in a horse stance, and then I'm going to rotate on the balls of my feet into a bow and arrow stance. So again, on a different angle, horse stance, rotating on the balls of the feet, rotating into a bow and arrow stance, and you can see that I'm sliding that back leg up, and I'm also rising up in my stance slightly. That rising gives me a little bit of extra power onto my punch. For this drill, I can either step backwards while I'm rotating from bow stance to bow stance, or conversely, I can step forward and do the same motion. You'll also notice that my backhand is pulling directly behind me, and that's because I'm trying to generate counterforce to my strike. You'll notice that Kung Fu places a lot of emphasis on posture, movement, and power generation, and this is true whether it's a strike, a grappling technique, or a wrestling and throwing technique.
This next technique is called a thrusting punch. A thrusting punch looks almost like a straight punch, but my elbow is down and my thumb is up, and I'm usually hitting with the last 3 knuckles, but I can also hit with the first 2 as well. When I strike with it, I'm rotating my body and I'm swinging the punch to the side. So even though this looks a lot like a straight punch, it's actually a swinging punch because I'm swinging and thrusting this punch right into its target. The way this punch is angled, it can slip right between somebody's guard. This is a really good alternative to a cross because it hits in a very similar way, and you can set it up in a very similar way that you would a cross. But the orientation of the punch is slightly different, and it actually has a good deal of range on it as well. I can hit to the body or I can hit to the head by just adjusting my level of my stance. It's another really, really powerful and very effective punch.
Just like the uppercut drill, we're starting in a horse stance, and then we're going to rotate into a bow and arrow stance before we throw that punch. Again, stepping into that horse stance, rotating on the balls of the feet, rotating the hips into a bow and arrow stance, and then shooting out the thrust punch. And remember, for this punch, I'm thrusting it out to the side of my body, not to the front of my body, and my thumb is facing upward and not inward like I would in a straight punch. For power generation, I'm pulling my other hand back into chamber almost as strongly as I'm thrusting out my punching hand. And I can punch either to the head or to the body, depending on the level of my strike. From this angle, you can see that the back leg slides up when you're throwing out that punch, and that slide up helps drive the rest of the force of your body through the strike. I can do this technique offensively while I'm stepping into an opponent, or I can do it defensively when I'm stepping away or dodging away from a punch and striking them back.
This next technique is called a swinging back fist. With a swinging back fist, I'm going to start with my hand in the center of my body and my elbow out. Before I strike, I'm going to rotate my body and bring my elbow past my shoulder. I'm going to bring my elbow past my shoulder, and then I'm going to extend my hand past the shoulder as well. When I hit, I'm going to hit with the back side of my knuckles. I can also hit with the forearm or the hammer fist as well. I can strike upward with it, straight across, or down. With this technique, you have to remember you're not hitting somebody in front of you. You're hitting them on the side or slightly behind you. If you have a square guard here, this is a very difficult strike to do because they're directly in front of you and there's no way to wind this up without them seeing it. If you're in a more side guard, or if your opponent steps a little bit to your side, that's when this technique works really well. For the swinging strike, it has a lot of power by striking it in the side of their head, or you could use a hammer fist to strike the side of their body, or you could just smash their guard, crush their guard down, and open them up for another shot. The other way I could do it is by spinning into my target and striking. You'll see the spinning back fist a little bit more in sports like Sanda, Sancho, and MMA than you will a regular standing back fist. But if you learn how to set this technique up, it's a great addition to your other strike arsenal.
I'm going to start off from a side-facing cat stance. I'm going to step forward and then swing into a bent bow and arrow stance, or kind of like a semi-side bow and arrow stance. Again, wind up that hand, step forward, and then rotate hard through with a full back fist swing. The wind-up position looks almost identical to the whipping back fist that I did in a different video, but instead, here I'm swinging that arm all the way through with full force. You also probably noticed that this back fist was the wind-up technique for several of the other techniques, but here we're practicing the back fist swing as its own separate individual strike. Now let's look at all the techniques in a series of exercises. So I'm starting up with that throwing punch, back fist down, whipping the arm upward, swinging from bow stance to bow stance. Now the overhand strike. So it's back fist to overhand strike, back fist to overhand strike, swinging bow stance to bow stance. Switching to the uppercut, again, rotating the body. Uppercut comes to the side of the body, backhand pulls back for momentum, and now the thrusting punch. See how the backhand pulls back into the chamber position while I'm thrusting that punch out to the side, and then I just transitioned into the swinging back fist, rotating in almost in a bow and arrow stance, like a bent bow and arrow stance. Let's look at a different angle, starting with a throwing punch, bow stance to bow stance, swing that on upward, and now heavy punch, swinging the arm overhand and downward, moving on to the uppercut, swinging that punch upward and outward to the side, and now the thrust punch, punching outward to the side, really focusing on that opposite hand pulling into chamber, and now the swinging back fist, rotating side to side, whipping my hand through.
These techniques come from the 5-element fist, and all of them rely on swinging and rotational power. I won't go into what the 5 elements are in this particular video, but if you're interested, let me know, and maybe we can make a video on it. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please let me know if there's any techniques that you want to learn in the comments down below, and I'll see you next time.